because the other movies don't really spend a lot of time with exposition and character development. They're all about action, really. There's a lot of action in all these DCAU movies. This is the first one that I think does really good on establishing characters. It does wonders with establishing the new relationship of Superman and Lois Lane. Because prior to that, it was Superman and Wonder Woman, which I was a big fan of, but I'm also a big fan of Superman and Lois. So either way, I'm not offended. It's all good. And they did really well with establishing Doomsday as a brute force. They didn't try to do the New 52 Doomsday thing where he infects Superman and then Superman gets Doomsday, becomes Doomsday. That's what it was. I hated that. Thought it was stupid in the comics. So I really like what they did with establishing him. He goes in and he annihilates. He annihilates those Atlanteans. It was wild. It was really wild to see that. It was kind of like a horror movie, kind of an entrance for Doomsday. And then once he makes it onto the mainland, Aquaman's doing his investigation, which I really thought that was kind of cool to kind of give that to Aquaman because you had Throne of Atlantis, which was really good, but then everything else just kind of there wasn't a lot for Aquaman. But so it was really fun to see Aquaman in this have a little bit more to do with Doomsday, to do with because this obviously affects him in a big way. And then once it gets to him and he kills the campers, he kills the grizzly bear. It does once again. It does really good with establishing this thing is a brute force of nature and he's a nightmare. Uh, it kind of it kind of reminded me of that scene in the graphic novel when he holds out his hand and he crushes that bird. Now I really want him to just hold out his hand like that, right? The bird laying on his hand and then he crushes the bird because that for me is some strong imagery, right? I think that would have been really good to have that in the movie as well. But I mean, you got him killing a grizzly bear and then some campers, and the campers begging for help that doesn't come. So it's pretty wild. It's pretty good. And then when they get into the fight in the small town, I wish it would have played out more like the graphic novel again, with like the family caught in the middle, and then Superman doing whatever he can to put a stop to Doomsday, but ultimately having to stop the chase with Doomsday and go back and save the family. And I wish they would have done that, but I didn't hate what they did, and which is just the Justice League fighting to the bitter end against Doomsday in this small town. It was really good, really powerful stuff. Shows you each character at their strongest and sort of at their peak, and why Superman is so important to the Justice League. And then when Superman shows up, lays waste to Doomsday. It's really good. And then that the whole fight scene with Doomsday is it's emotional. It's an emotional fight with Doomsday, and it's powerful, and it shows Superman just unleashed, and it's really, really great. My favorite part of the whole fight is when Superman is on the bridge, and then there's that mom and her child that are caught there in the middle, and Superman is trying to be Superman, save this family, and he barely does, and it's really good. It's like, oh man, that's good storytelling. I loved it. I thought that was really good. And then when you get to the actual death of Superman. You got Lois standing there holding that rock, and she just throws it at Doomsday, trying to buy her man a little extra time, a few extra seconds to do what he can do. It was really good. It was heavy. It was pretty good stuff, and I wish it would have been more like the comic books because what I like about the comic book, the graphic novel, is where Superman holds Lois in his arms and says, remember, no matter what happens, I will always love you. Gives her a smooch, goes off, and he finishes off Doomsday. I was wanting something more like that, but I didn't hate what we got because that whole thing is kind of implied in the actions leading up to the death of Superman. And it's really good. And if you guys haven't checked it out, I recommend you check it out. So my next video is going to be obviously Reign of Superman.